To Jim's point, it's interesting that Nvidia is down pre-market. China says it is investigating the chip maker over possible violations of the country's anti-monopoly law. The nation's antitrust regulator adds the company suspected of violating commitments that it made during its 2020 acquisition of Mellanox. The probe comes in the wake of U.S. actions aimed, of course, at restricting chip sales in China.
Yeah, they should have thought of that before.
Jim Cramer discusses Nvidia's stock dip following China's anti-monopoly investigation linked to its 2020 Mellanox acquisition. He views the probe as potentially retaliatory for U.S. restrictions on chip sales to China but downplays its significance, calling it an overreaction to sell Nvidia shares over this issue. Cramer highlights Nvidia's innovative culture and CEO Jensen Huang's leadership as key to its resilience and dominance in emerging technologies like AI. He emphasizes the company's ability to adapt and thrive despite challenges, driven by its relentless focus on innovation and speed. He concludes by framing the investigation within broader U.S.-China trade tensions, noting Nvidia's strategic importance in the tech industry. Despite this, Cramer remains confident in Nvidia's long-term success due to its strong leadership and unique culture.
I mean, Mellanox was a deal that everyone just said, look, we're going to give it an incredible amount of scrutiny, and they did that. This is not like the Google contract to Apple in order to be able to keep us at the default, David. Now, you know that it could be, you can't have this kind of remorse years later and think you're going to have an impact. What do you think? You know CFIUS. What can they do to tie it against us? What is their? They can't break up a deal.
I'm saying CFIUS is here.
No, I'm saying
sorry. What are you talking about?
We block deals, but once the deals go through, we tend not to reopen them.
That is typically the case.
I think that was also. I thought that was also the way of China. Once they've approved something, give it a hard look.
I don't know enough, nor do I think many know enough about the Chinese antitrust regulatory apparatus to make assumptions.
You mean you make it sound like it's in flux?
I think it's difficult to know, and it will be even more difficult to discern.
But what can they do? Why would you sell the stock?
We do get into another more heated trade war with.
Okay,
with China.
Look, the stock was going down 3 on Friday. I would tell you somebody obviously had this because there was nothing else going on. But what can you do? Why would you sell Nvidia on this? They're going to kick them out for the hobbled. Remember, I told you they have a hobbled chip that goes to them.
Yes.
What are they going to do?
All right. So you think it's much ado about nothing?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I do.
Okay.
I think it's much ado about nothing. Look, the people who are selling it now in this market, they want to make themselves look right. They'll sell it down to 138 so they can say, hey, I took Cramer doesn't know anything. Like I matter.
Nvidia, as you know, is one of the most iconic businesses of the last decade. Shares up nearly 27,000, that's right, 27,000% over the last 10 years and nearly 200% this year alone. A key figure behind the company's rise, of course, is CEO and founder Jensen Huang. Our next guest spoke with him exclusively for his new book titled The Nvidia Way, Jensen Huang and the Making of a Tech Giant. The book hits shelves tomorrow. Barron's senior tech writer Tay Kim joins us here at Post 9, also a former Bloomberg and CNBC writer. Congratulations, Tay. Great to have you.
Thanks, Carl. So good to be here.
You talked to him for the book, right?
Yes.
When was that?
It was in June of this year. I had an hour with him right after his Caltech commencement speech.
How much of the book looks at the origins, which are fascinating just on their own, and then the culture, and how the cultures allowed them to do what they do?
I'd say it's about half and half. It's a business history of the full 30 years of the company, and then a lot of it is focused on their distinctive, unique culture, which I think is the reason why they've been so successful. I mean, it's like extraordinary outcome. Like you said, the stock performance is incredible. It's actually the best performing U.S. stock in history, with any stock with 20-year returns. You
make the point that a lot of it is due to Jensen's blend of being a technical genius and then a business genius.
Yes. So he has that unique combination that I think most CEOs don't have. Every time there's an instance of where they're almost about to go out of business, he's resilient and resourceful. He comes out with solutions and funding that just come out of nowhere. And he's always been super charismatic ever since the beginning. There was a time in the late 1990s when Intel was trying to snuff them out, telling PC makers, don't buy Nvidia chips, we're coming out with something better. Their sales pipeline completely dried up. And Jensen went to his workforce. He's famous for saying every 30 days, we're about to go out of business. And this time it was true. They're running out of money. And he told his employees, Intel is out to get us. Don't make no mistake. We have to fight back and kill Intel. And that sounds a little, superficial, whatever. but the employees were inspired. They were working past midnight. One employee told me that she woke up at like 4 or 5 in the morning and said, "Oh, I just worked at midnight. I really want to go back to sleep, but no, I have to wake up. We must kill Intel, kill Intel." So she's like muttering in her head. She was inspired to work harder to fight.
Tay, if Intel's, let's call it a handful of decisions by former CEOs, doomed the company to some extent, what are the decisions that, on the other side, that Jensen made that obviously brought such great success? Are there a couple that you could cite?
I think one key thing is they talk about speed of light, working with extreme speed and velocity. And if you look back at their video game history in 1990s, they accelerated the product cycle from 18 months to 6 months. I mean, that sounds incredible, right? Typically, a chip took 18 months to design and ship, and they said, no, we're going to do that every 6 months. And that drove all their competitors out of business. And they're doing the same exact playbook with AI. It used to take 2 years to make an AI GPU, and then October of last year, they're like, no, we're going to do that every single year. And that kind of relentless execution, improvement has shown why they've been successful for the last 30 years.
What I like is that you trace it all the way back to when they were a startup. Often, though, this is a very different company than it was back then. When the company gets very big, it changes,
yes.
Right? Structure, culture, innovation, that sort of desire to go out and kill and compete. What's your sense of what's happening now that it's become a multi-trillion-dollar company leading AI?
So that's exactly the main point. The key thing that happens, I think, for most corporations in the US is as they get larger, this dysfunction just breeds inside the company. You get endless meetings, indecisive paralysis. Some of the sources told me it's like swimming in quicksand trying to get decisions done. And at Google, Microsoft, Apple, just the bureaucracy goes insane. Nvidia, Jensen's culture has been able to tamper that down. I mean, if you do anything where you're trying to make your boss's boss better, which I think is a big portion of all the internal politics and bureaucracy, he'll dress you down right in public. And he told me, if someone is ever doing that, like, I'll embarrass him in front of everyone. And if I do that once or twice, no one's ever going to do that again. So that kind of like flat organization and hating internal politics and slowness, he's so paranoid of being disrupted by a startup that's faster. So he's been able to kind of drive NVIDIA, even though it's 30,000 employees, at the speed of a startup.
Right. We get a taste of his management philosophy sometimes when he speaks publicly, but we can't wait to dive into this book. Tay, congratulations once again.
All right, thank you.
Great.
Thanks so much
for
for
having
having
Way,
me.
Jensen Huang, and the making of a tech giant.
All right, speaking of semis, Nvidia falling more than 2.5% today after a Chinese regulator opened an investigation into the chip maker for potential violation of the country's anti-monopoly law. This as China leaders promised more proactive fiscal measures next year to boost the economy. That sent shares of JD.com, PDD, Baidu, and Alibaba jumping 7% or more. For more on what the stimulus could mean, let's bring in CNBC contributor DeWardrick McNeil. He's the managing director at Longview Global. DeWardrick, great to see you. I first want to tackle this NVIDIA issue in the probe there. Let's be clear, is this retaliation?
Melissa, it will certainly be perceived that way by many here in Washington and elsewhere. China has spent several years building out a large toolkit of statecraft tools like the anti-monopoly law, the anti-foreign sanctions law, the unreliable entities list. And we're seeing these actions of companies being added to these lists after the U.S. has taken actions that China dislike. The perception will be Nvidia was added to, or at least the investigation was announced under the anti-monopoly law after the U.S. last week tightened restrictions on semiconductors. We've seen this with Skydio after the U.S. sold drones to Taiwan. And so I haven't seen the details. There certainly may be some legitimate monopoly issues here. This dates back to a 2020 purchase of Mellanox Technology. So people will wonder, well, what took 4 years to get us here, lending more credibility to this being a retaliatory action versus one that's really based on the economic fundamentals of antitrust.
In conclusion, Jim Cramer believes Nvidia's stock dip due to a Chinese anti-monopoly investigation is likely a retaliatory move amid U.S.-China tensions. He advises against selling Nvidia shares, as the company's strong market position and leadership under Jensen Huang remain intact. Cramer highlights Nvidia's resilience and innovative culture as key factors in its continued success. Cramer also emphasizes Huang's ability to navigate challenges, particularly in AI and gaming, ensuring Nvidia's growth. Despite external pressures, Nvidia's strategic importance continues to rise. Do you think Nvidia will maintain its lead in the market? How should investors respond to international tensions affecting companies like Nvidia?